Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of Mortal Mission by Pip Skinner. This is a book that came out in 2023. It's a sci-fi book. It's self-published. I read this book as part of the SPSFC3. As I've mentioned a few times, I am a judge in the SPSFC3 this year, and this book was one of our quarterfinalists. So an entertaining mystery set on Mars, Mortal Mission is a lot of fun. What's it about? Will they find life on Mars or death? When the science officer for the first mission to Mars dies suddenly, backup Hattie Fredericks gets the coveted place on the crew. But her presence on the starship provokes suspicion when it coincides with a series of incidents which threaten to derail the mission. After a near miss while landing on the planet, the world watches as Hattie and her fellow astronauts struggle to survive. But worse than the harsh elements on Mars is their growing realization that someone, somewhere, is trying to destroy the mission. When more astronauts die, Hattie doesn't know who to trust. And her only allies are 35 million miles away. As the tension ratchets up, violence and suspicion invade both worlds. So fusing mystery and sci-fi, this novel is an entertaining, fairly quick read. Given this was for the SPSFC, I'm going to have to dive a little deeper into the different facets of the novel than I normally would, but I will say that it's quite enjoyable, but I didn't love it like some of the other books in the competition. Part of this is because when it comes to the characters, I found the astronauts in particular acted quite immature at times. It seemed like they weren't prepared for some of the tasks or procedures despite 2 years of training. So I'm basing this on having read Chris Hadfield's memoir, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, which is fantastic if you're interested in space and stuff like that, which talked a lot about actual NASA missions to space. So when the astronauts in the story weren't aware of certain protocols, or when it seemed like they hated Hattie despite having likely worked with her for 2 years as an alternate would have, that seemed very odd to me. We also don't learn anything about the astronauts' backstories until vital points in the plot, which left me not wholly invested in whether they lived or died because I didn't really know them. I was much more interested in Chuck, Gina, and Grace back on Earth. I thought Chuck and Gina's dynamic was quite funny, and the intricacies around Chuck's ability to uncover the mystery was very engaging. When it came to the plot, at around 60% I figured out who done it, so to speak, so while I enjoyed how it unraveled, I found the mystery interesting but not particularly mind-blowing. Likewise, while this wasn't a hard sci-fi, it didn't seem plausible to me that the first crewed mission to Mars happened after inventing an artificial gravity machine. To create gravity without spin would require a massive amount of energy, and given they barely had enough fuel to get to Mars, it seemed bizarre they'd spend energy on that when they could just spin the ship. I mean, this isn't a huge deal or anything, but given this is a competition, I'm being a bit picky here. There's also no explanation as to how the artificial coma works that the astronauts were placed into for their travels. And I also wasn't sure if this was a joke or not, but astronauts do wear bras in space. I'm not sure why it would be assumed by anybody that they didn't. I thought that was a weird kind of comment. Maybe it was just the one character like making fun of the other, but I was like, that's strange. I did enjoy the premise of the mystery and the reason behind the murders. I thought that was fun, as that aspect was quite believable, honestly, especially in the United States. The book also, though, did fall a bit flat for me in terms of the writing. While the action scenes were very fun, at times it felt like the book needed another proofreader. Sure, there's a 10% margin of error for typos, but I noticed more than I'd expect in that regard. There were a lot of improperly used words, and sometimes rather than having actions precede speech, they were on separate lines for the same character, which confused me as to who was speaking. There was also a lot of passive voice to the point where I found myself not engaging as I could have. But again, I'm an editor, so I notice this stuff. And when I start reading a book and I start falling into editor, mode, then I know that there might be a bit of a writing issue. But if you like mysteries and you like Mars and you like kind of like a sci-fi setting, but it's just kind of like lightly sci-fi, not like a hard sci-fi, I think you should check it out. It is fun. Onwards to the SPSC part of it. As I said before, we rate the books out of 10, and to make it fair, I'm rating each book's aspects, writing, characters, world building, and plot out of 2.5, and then a tiebreaker for 1. So for this one, I'm giving the writing a 1. The world building wasn't really anything different from today, but world building for me also includes believability, so that's getting a 1 for me too. The plot gets a 1.5, as I kind of figured it out earlier than I would have liked. The characters are also getting a 1.5 for me because while they were understandable and with motives that made sense, I didn't love any of them, and the astronauts were a bit too immature, as I said. So for me, the book is getting a 6 out of 10 for me, as there was no kind of like tiebreaker. So this is the last book that I've reviewed for our quarterfinalists, and yeah, I'm really excited to still be part of the competition. It's moving forward. I believe at the end of the month they're going to be, or early next month, they're going to be announcing the semifinalists. So Just because I happen to give this book a 6 doesn't mean that other people aren't going to give it like a 10. So don't count on my particular ratings to tell you which books will be moving to the semifinalists. Just saying. So yeah, thanks for watching, everyone, and catch you later.